Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. This may be one of the most important episodes of the Reality Revolution podcast, and I have talked about these things many times before. I've tried to cover the quantum element of reality creation on several episodes, and I talk about it a little bit in my book, but some of those are harder to understand. But I really hope that if you understand the fundamental idea behind many of the background theories about quantum physics, it will help you to understand how you control the universe. It's the invisible link. In this episode, we're going to move from the world of the macrocosm, the visible material world, to the world of the microcosm, the invisible non-material world. It is in this incredible and fascinating subatomic world, the world of the quantum, that we find the invisible link to the source of miracles. This is where we can begin to understand how and why miracles take place. If you are like me and many others, learning even a little bit about this strange invisible world will help you to understand how the miracle-making process works, and why it works the way it does, and why it can't work any other way. If you want to make miracles in your life, you will probably have to make some changes. And for most of us, it's a lot easier to make changes when we understand why it's to our benefit to make them. First, let's look at some background. Almost 2,500 years ago, a Greek philosopher known as Democritus of Abdera theorized that at the smallest divisible level, all the matter in the universe might be comprised of very small invisible building blocks. He called this elementary building block an atom, or that which cannot be cut. It turns out that Democritus was right. An atom is the smallest particle into which our basic elements, i.e. iron or copper, can be divided. Some 2.5 millennia after Democritus, Richard Feynman, the brilliant Caltech physicist, said very simply, all things are made of atoms. Atoms are very, very small. Feynman uses this example. If an apple were magnified to the size of the Earth, then the atoms in the apple would be approximately the size of the original apple. And that's just the atom. Atoms are composed of subatomic particles, also called quantum particles, which in various combinations give the atom its individual characteristic. If the atom is small, these subatomic particles within the atom are incredibly smaller. For example, the nucleus of the atom, which houses the quantum particles, is only 1/millionth of a billionth of the volume of the atom. The nucleus contains protons and neutrons and also has electrons orbiting around it, and all of these are quantum particles. So when we are talking quantum, we are talking so small, there isn't really a good word for it. What is so amazing is that we live in a quantum universe. In How to Know God, best-selling author Dr. Deepak Chopra describes the realm of the quantum as the transitional place between spirit, God, the source, higher power, first cause, and the material world. Thinking of it in this way helps us to begin to comprehend the incomprehensible, how the power and wisdom that undergirds and permeates the universe moves into physical manifestation. This mysterious, non-material realm forms an underlying fabric in, through, and around everything in the natural world. Importantly, it is in this realm that our intentions, thoughts, desires, and emotions begin the process of affecting not only our bodies, but also the events and circumstances of our lives. We must understand the unseen world. As we discuss this unseen world, we look at 3 central points regarding the universe and our relationship to it, making me think of Psychiana, where he says, number 1, our universe is a universe of law. And 2, natural law is the physical manifestation of a higher degree of order. And 3, that we live in a universe of connectedness and we actually participate in the operation of it. Now, first of all, our universe is a universe of law. This is an orderly universe from top to bottom, from inside and outside. For instance, we have already seen that although the very beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, may appear to have been chaotic, absolute order, balance, and harmony underpinned everything. In fact, the chaos itself was necessary to the unfolding harmony. The same, by the way, is often true in our own lives. Everything we want to accomplish in our lives will always be done through the understanding and use of appropriate laws. Everything will be orderly, although it may not always feel that way. This is one of the most important keys to making miracles in our lives. Here's an example. Gravity is probably the best known physical phenomenon, and for years the idea of a flying machine was thought to be only fantasy. But after many failed attempts, Orville and Wilbur Wright did construct a machine that flew, and then another that flew even greater distances. The Wright brothers did not defy the law of gravity. They actually worked with it. Very simply, the velocity of the wind passing over the curved top of the plane's wing was greater than that across the flat underside. This lowered the downward pressure and caused an upward thrust of the plane. So their plane flew. New law? No, the law of gravity did not change. Aerodynamic principles did not change. Nothing changed except that the Wright brothers developed a greater understanding and use of the existing laws and principles. Here's another application of the same law. If you throw a large piece of heavy metal into water, you'll find that it sinks. Why then does a metal cruise ship weighing tons float? Why doesn't it sink? Different law. No, simply a greater understanding of the principles related to the law of gravity. This is an illustration of Archimedes' Principle, which says that the weight of an object is counteracted by the weight of the volume of water it displaces. Because the ship is hollow, the steel cruise ship, even though it may weigh thousands of tons, actually weighs less than the water it displaces. Therefore, it floats. This is why a bottle with its top on will float in the dishpan, but when the top is removed and the bottle fills with water, it will sink. The key point I'm making, of course, has nothing to do with airplanes or cruise ships or even Archimedes. The key point is there are laws at work everywhere in our lives. And these natural and spiritual laws produce different results completely depending on how they are used. And then secondly, we said natural law is the physical expression of a higher degree of order. And you've all heard as above, so below. If you wish, you can call this higher degree of order a spiritual law. The famous astrophysicist Sir James Jeans referred to this higher degree of order as an infinite thinker thinking mathematically, and to the universe as looking more like a great thought than like a great machine. This is particularly significant because he was contrasting a consciousness-based universe with the mechanistic universe of Newtonian physics. This gives the unmistakable implication that a higher form of thought or thinker is responsible for the universe and everything in it. There is a universal power and intelligence underpinning this awesome universe we inhabit. This is the same power and intelligence that underpins each one of us as we move through our lives. So regardless of how you want to look at it or what you choose to call it, the higher degree of order or spiritual law is reflected in everything that happens and in everything that is. And that includes you and me, going all the way down to the quantum like a Fibonacci sequence. The spiritual and mental laws and principles we discuss are every bit as infallible and predictable as the laws of nature. Just as the Wright brothers are able to fly once they make the proper application of the principles of aerodynamics and the working of natural law, we too make miracles in our lives when we make the proper application of spiritual law. However, we don't have to understand the laws and principles that govern our lives in order to use them. We are always using them whether we fully understand them or not. Flying birds are a perfect example. Each of us lived with and used the law of gravity long before we even knew there was such a thing as gravity. So too, do we use the spiritual laws and principles that govern our lives all the time, every day, 24/7. The laws of the universe are always working, bringing either positive or negative results into our lives, depending on how we're using them. When the top is on the bottle, it floats. And when the top is off the bottle, it sinks. Same law, different application, different result. And third, we live in a universe of connectedness, and we actually participate in the operation of it. From the time of the philosopher Plato and the mathematician Pythagoras, and even back to the ancient mysteries of Egypt, sages and philosophers have believed that we live in a universe of connectedness. But it was not until the 20th century and the exploration of quantum physics that this was scientifically demonstrated. Equally amazing, during the past 40 years or so, science has begun to recognize and reveal one of the most important and exciting aspects of miracles. Man's role in the universe is not that of an observer, but rather that of a participator. John Wheeler, PhD of Princeton University, sees this involvement of the observer as the most important feature of quantum theory, and he has therefore suggested replacing the word observer with the word participator. In other words, miracles don't happen to us, they happen by means of us. Contrary to the popular belief that miracles are the random gifts of whimsical deities, science today is demonstrating that we have an active role in the circumstances of our lives. All of this is due to the comparatively recent scientific study of quantum physics, an Alice in Wonderland world where nothing seems to make any sense compared to how the world appears to our five senses. However, it is the place where spiritual law begins its expression in the physical world by means of natural law. Entering the world of the quantum. The entry into the world of the quantum was accidental. As scientists probed deeper into the study of the universe, they were puzzled by findings that didn't make sense based on anything else they knew. And for a very long time after they first became able to study the behavior of particles at the quantum level, none of them knew quite what to make of their weird findings. The only consistency seemed to be that their findings were consistently bizarre and unpredictable, and that they themselves were consistently puzzled and frustrated. Their findings were contradicting the basic tenets of classical Newtonian physics that had governed the world for the preceding 300 years. These great men, with brilliant minds, made comments such as these. Henry Poincare, an exceptional French mathematician and physicist, when he unwittingly stumbled across a quantum effect that he realized could completely change the whole Newtonian model of the solar system. These things are so bizarre that I cannot bear to contemplate them. Albert Einstein, again objecting to what seemed to him an element of unpredictability or randomness in science. God does not play dice. Niels Bohr, a leading theoretical physicist who was among the pioneers in the study of the quantum world, said, "Anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it." Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders of quantum theory, said, "I don't like it and I'm sorry I ever had anything to do with it." What was taking place in the scientific world to provoke these amazing comments? What were these men finding that was so puzzling and shocking to them? As scientists probed the mysteries of quantum physics, these were some of the astonishing, puzzling, and scientifically confounding phenomena they encountered. As they searched to find elementary particles, they found instead things that actually changed form and properties as the particles responded to each other and the scientist observing them. They found waves becoming particles and particles becoming waves. Sometimes these things actually danced into and out of existence as they moved from the world of the invisible into the world of the visible and back out again. As unbelievable as it sounds, these subatomic particles somehow even seemed to know what the observer was testing for, and they did it. Further, if the observer changed his or her mind about what he or she wanted to observe, the particle immediately responded to the new desire or expectation of the observer. These things were so astonishing because for over 500 years, from the time of Copernicus and Galileo, scientists had understood our world to operate like a perfect machine, governed by exact mathematical laws. Man lived in it, used and enjoyed it, but was not connected to it in any way. Newtonian physics dealt with a world that was believed to be predictable, mechanistic, and precise. With the evolution of quantum physics, however, that changed. Newton's theories are now recognized to apply to the visible world. However, they simply do not work at the subatomic level. Conversely, quantum theory is applicable at the level of both the visible, macroscopic, and invisible subatomic world. Essentially, then, quantum theory does not replace Newtonian physics, it transcends it by extending our scientific knowledge into the subatomic realm, a realm where the laws of physics are completely different. Here are some of the main aspects of Newtonian physics, which have now been supplemented by a better understanding of our universe because of the new science of quantum physics. According to Newtonian physics, 1. Our universe was believed to be an objective universe. This meant A. It was understood only through the five senses. B. Anything that had an impact on it was observable, measurable, and predictable. And C. Any influence we had on the universe was only through our actions. 2. Our universe was deterministic, predictable. And 3. Anything real had to have visible and tangible form. 4. We lived in a world of material form separated by empty space. Through the study of the quantum realm, we know now that not one of the above statements is so. For example, science has now learned that we live in a universe that is an undivided whole. We are one with it and part of it. It is a world of potentiality rather than predictability, and we actually participate in the operation of this universe. It responds to us. It took many years before physicists realized that the paradoxes they were encountering are essential aspects of quantum physics. They had to let go of their basic concepts, their language, their whole way of thinking. None of it was relevant to the quantum world, but when they did let go of the old paradigms and began asking the right questions, they were able to accurately formulate what we know today as quantum theory, which we will try to explain in a moment. In the world of the quantum, science has found a world that is rich, complex, and deeply intimate. Rather than a world of separateness, it has found a world of relationships. And rather than a world of critical mass, it has found a world of critical relationships. And rather than a world of predictability, it has found a world of potentialities. Rather than a world that is merely here for us to use and enjoy, it has found a world in whose operation we are active participants by the mere existence of our consciousness. A world responsive to our awareness of it and our mental interactivity with it. This illustrates how important it is to be able to open to new ways of thinking. Scientists are trained to do this, but we too can do the same thing when we set or determine our intention and commit to be open in our thinking. So it comes down to how energy flows. In 1900, a young German student named Max Planck opened the door to the quantum realm when he wrote a formula on a postcard and mailed it to a colleague. In that formula, he theorized that energy was not absorbed and emitted in a steady stream, as was then believed, but rather that it was contained in separate little packets that he called quanta. The singular is quantum, Latin for packet. Another major advance took place in 1926 when Werner Heisenberg made an amazing discovery called the Heisenberg Uncertainty Principle. I'm sure you've heard that, probably heard it in school. But do you understand it? It was this discovery that subsequently led to the development of quantum theory, or the theory of movement at the quantum level. If you look at my book, I explain an event that happened to me where I became aware of parallel realities. That's why I started looking into this stuff, and I started to understand how to use it to my advantage. In the macrocosmic or visible world, particles are things, but in the quantum world, a particle is not a thing or an entity. A quantum particle is a tendency to exist or a tendency to happen. A quantum particle is a potential waiting to become something. Additionally, a quantum particle actually has two forms of being, particle and wave. When the scientist measures its position, it becomes a particle, but when its movement is being measured, it becomes a wave. In other words, scientists learned they could measure either the particle aspect or the wave aspect, either location or movement, but could not measure both at the same time. Based on the strange particle wave phenomenon, Heisenberg formulated his now famous uncertainty principle, i.e. the more accurately you try to measure the position of a subatomic particle, the less accurately you can measure its speed and vice versa. This principle led Heisenberg, together with Schrödinger and Paul Dirac, to develop the theory of quantum mechanics. And even now, there are more discoveries at the quantum level. Originally, scientists thought there must be some unknown reason they weren't able to observe the well-defined positions and velocities of quantum particles. And finally, they realized quantum particles didn't have well-defined positions and velocities. Quantum theory said that these particles actually had a quantum state that was a combination of both position and velocity. As they delved further into this strange realm, scientists learned they could make predictions when large numbers of subatomic occurrences were involved. But single subatomic events did not seem to have any relationship to the larger occurrences. Were these events simply random, or what? At the quantum level, cause and effect, as scientists had always understood it, simply did not seem to exist. Scientists eventually learned that in general, quantum physics does not predict a single definite result for any given observation. Quantum physics predicts a number of different potential outcomes and tells us the likelihood of each of these. So instead of working with the exact predictability they had experienced with Newtonian physics, scientists found themselves in the uncomfortable position of working with possibilities and probabilities. It was their worst nightmare come true. It was too early for scientists to realize that these puzzling observations were the first glimmering of the fact that the physical world responds to our expectations, that recognition would not come for another half-century. It is exactly this area of potential and probability that opens the door to all the variety of manifestation at the physical level. We exist in a world of unbroken connectedness. It was actually in an effort to discredit quantum theory that Einstein accidentally established that the world in which we live is one in which there is an invisible connection between all things. Despite his own Nobel Prize-winning contribution to quantum theory, Einstein had remained very skeptical about this whole new field. The unpredictability of it really bothered him. Something had to be wrong with this new theory, and during the mid-30s, Einstein had many debates with his colleagues and friends Niels Bohr, one of which related to whether or not matter could be affected by influence that might travel faster than the speed of light. Quantum theory seemed to indicate this could be so, but for years within the scientific community, everybody knew that nothing could travel faster than the speed of light. It was one of the basic tenets of Einstein's own special theory of relativity. Intending to discredit quantum theory, Einstein and two of his associates, Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, put together a mathematical thought exercise that carried quantum theory to ridiculous lengths, and they arrived at what everybody agreed was an absolutely ridiculous answer. First, some background. Subatomic particles, or electrons for instance, have a property called spin. When two electrons are paired, they behave as a single unit. If one spins up, the other spins down. If one spins right, the other spins left. If the spin of one electron changes, the spin of the other electron changes direction as well, instantly. This famous thought exercise became known as the Epr Paradox and showed that according to quantum theory, this behavior would remain unchanged regardless of how far apart the electrons were from each other. One electron could be a half world away from its twin and it would respond instantly with the corresponding complementary spin. In other words, they would behave as one completely unified electron. There were two impossibles with this proposal, or so thought the scientific community at the time. First, it would be impossible for one electron, many thousands of miles from its twin, to know that the spin of the other had changed. Secondly, even if there were some sort of long-distance communication, it would still be impossible for this electron to know and respond to instantly. This would violate a limitation imposed by Einstein's special theory of relativity. Nothing travels faster than the speed of light. So either quantum theory was wrong or one of the tenets of Einstein's special theory of relativity was wrong. Debate raged long and heavy for the next 30 years until it turned out both are correct. Unfortunately, Einstein didn't live long enough to see his Epr paradox proven valid. He decided in 1955, and it was another 9 years before a physicist named John S. Bell developed what became known as Bell's theorem. This theorem proved that Einstein's tongue-in-cheek proposition does in fact hold true. Instantaneous change in widely separated systems do take place. Henry Stapp, a physicist at Berkeley and probably the leading authority on the implication of Bell's theorem, has called it the most important discovery in the history of science. What does this mean? How can it be understood without contradicting Einstein's important theory that nothing travels faster than the speed of light? Well, it means very simply that the two electrons, no matter how far apart they are part of an invisible whole that cannot be broken into parts. There is no long-distance communication. There is an invisible and unbroken connectedness. This was the first scientific proof of a web of connectedness between all things in the universe. To this day, science continues to prove that at the quantum level, communication takes place, not at the speed of light, but instantaneously. Experiments have proved that just as the one particle knew when to change its spin to correspond with its twin, wave particles in laboratory tests even seem to know what kind of experiment was being conducted and to behave accordingly. For our purposes, possibly the most important experiment is known as the double slit experiment. Very simply, if the observer is measuring motion, the wave particles become waves. If the observer is measuring location, they obediently become particles. If the researcher changes the experiment at the last moment, the wave particle responds instantly. Repeatedly, science has found that particles and waves respond to the expectation of the experimenter and do what he or she wants them to do. And we have to also talk about fields. And there's one area of quantum physics that is important, and that is fields. And despite the fact that for centuries atoms were believed to be fundamental building blocks of matter, science has now learned the basic substance of the universe is comprised of invisible quantum subatomic fields. A very simple definition of quantum fields would be non-material patterns of energy that exert visible influence. As an example, put some iron filings near a magnet and watch the patterns that form. These patterns are due to the invisible magnetic field. Other well-known fields are the gravitational field existing between physical bodies and electromagnetic fields, such as those which radiate from radio and TV transmitter antennas. Fields existed throughout space and time. They are the medium through which energy is carried in the form of waves. It is from these fields of energy that particles emerge. The fields in the universe are infinite in number, and they are endlessly flowing, moving, being drawn toward or repelled from other fields. Researchers such as Robert John and Brenda Dunn of the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory suggest that the realm of the mind where thoughts are born behaves much like the quantum realm of waves and particles. Let me try to explain very simply what this means to you and me, and miracles. When electricity moves along a wire, it creates a field. So too, when a thought moves in mind, it creates a field. When that field interacts with another field, something happens, a particle emerges, an idea begins to take form. Although there remains much scientific work to be done, every step continues to scientifically verify the concept that the quantum realm is the transitional realm between spirit and the material world, the realm where the power, intelligence, balance, and harmony that created the universe continues to move into physical expression. And even more exciting, it is a realm that it responds to the expectancy of the individual observer or participant. This is an all-important point. The meaning of these awesome new findings can best be summarized in the words of individual scientists themselves. British physicist David Bohm, ultimately the entire universe with all its particles, including those constituting human beings, their laboratories, observing instruments, has to be understood as a single, undivided whole. Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, because the rules of quantum theory are supposed to apply to all matter, not just subatomic matter, by extension of this ubiquitous interconnected resonance. The suggestion is that all nature is in some sense wave-like, field-like, and mind-like in a way that isn't yet fully understood. Imagine there's a resonance present everywhere in nature, interacting and mind-like. John Wheeler, well-known physicist at Princeton, may the universe in some strange way be brought into being by the participation of those who participate. The vital act is the act of participation. Participator is the incontrovertible new concept given by quantum mechanics. Does this mean that our consciousness directly affects the affairs of our lives in the real world? Does this mean that human consciousness actually shapes the mighty events of the universe itself? The most profound statement on this comes once more from Henry Stapp, the authority on the implications of the Bell's theorem. Stapp contends Bell's theorem demonstrates the effect of human consciousness at the level of the macroscopic. This means the world we see, this means therefore the world we live in, can no longer be considered an objective universe or one which is separate from us. Commenting on this statement by Stapp, author Dr. Larry Dossey writes, "The impact of our consciousness lies both in the direction of the very small and the very large. The sword of consciousness cuts both toward the galaxy and the atom." What is the impact of Dossey's words? If the impact of our consciousness affects not only the very small, the microcosm, but also the very large, the macrocosm, then it must also affect each of us and the very events of our lives. If this is so, we need to be very clear in our understanding of consciousness, and even more importantly, in how we use it. So although there remains a great deal of scientific work to fully substantiate and explain exactly how the invisible moves into the visible in our lives, we do know that the potentiality with which the invisible first makes itself known is directly affected by consciousness, our consciousness. And this is where you come in. If you haven't stopped the podcast at this point, if you said, "Oh, I've heard it all before," think again. I give all of that in the first part of this so that you understand that you are involved. There is one mind common to all individual men, Ralph Waldo Emerson said. Every man is an inlet to the same and to all the same. Now we come to the most important person in your world, and that's you. And indeed, if you do not already consider yourself the most important person in your world, I hope you will change your mind by the time you finish reading this chapter. You are the observer or participator in your world. In terms of miracles, this means that you are the thinker in your life, you're the participator, you are the co-creator of the things that happen to you. We've learned that we actually participate in the things that take place at the level of the quantum, and subsequently in the things that take place in our world. But exactly how do we participate? In one way and one way only, at the level of consciousness. Remember the all-important law of co-creation. Consciousness manifests, dominant thought prevails. We've explored the scientific view. Thought is energy, and it is the interaction of the energy of thought with another form of energy, in this case the quantum, that directs the quantum to make the change from the unexpressed potentiality to expressed actuality. So in some strange way that scientists have observed but do not yet fully understand, our consciousness affects the quantum in the process of its expression. This tells us that what we choose to think is of primary importance in terms of what happens in our world. Also important is the recognition that this creative principle works whether or not we understand it. Just like the bird we mentioned earlier. Just as the law of gravity is always working, we are always using it whether or not we understand it. The same is true of creative principles. They're always at work, and we are always using them whether or not we understand them. When we know that such principles exist, however, and we learn to work with them and use them properly, we begin to make miracles in our lives. You see, miracles don't come about by chance. They don't come about because we are nice people. They also don't come about just because we want them desperately, although it does help to really want something, I believe. Up to a point where you don't create an imbalancing force. Miracles come about because of consciousness. It is through our consciousness that we create the miracle. And because of this, we are not victims. Miracles are the spiritual birthright of each one of us. I keep on mentioning the word miracle in this episode. And I'm trying to give a sense, just like in A Course of Miracles, because the miracle is the word, this thing that happens beyond your own recognition of what is possible, is what I'm talking about. If our consciousness is the primary determinant of our miracle or the good we want in our world, then let's get clear on what consciousness is. Although Webster's dictionary defines consciousness as mental awareness, this is a very incomplete definition. Our consciousness is the entire mental field encompassing all the intentions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and experiences, waking and sleeping, conscious and subconscious, that we have ever had or experienced. Thus, our mind and our brain are two different things. Our brain is the physical receptor and storage unit of our experiences, and our mind is the initiator, the thinker, as it were. Our brain operates at the level of the visible, our mind the invisible. So when we talk about consciousness, we are talking not about the brain, but about our individual mind. All that we ever are, ever have been, or ever will be conscious of comes only through our mind. And all of that will always remain part of our consciousness. Although we have one and only one mind and it is indivisible, it functions at two very different levels, identified as, first of all, the conscious mind, or the surface mind, or the objective mind, and then the subjective mind, or the subliminal mind, or the subconscious mind, or the deeper mind. The conscious mind is the mind that has the five senses, receives all our information from the outer world, is what we use to reason, to analyze, to discern and judge and make decisions. And very importantly, with our conscious mind, we choose what we want to think, what we want to be, what we want to do and have. And our subconscious mind receives and retains everything we think, say, do, and experience. It accepts as true everything that comes to it through the conscious mind, provided that the conscious mind accepts it as true. It does not judge the thought patterns coming to it from the conscious mind. It simply goes about bringing into our lives experiences and conditions that are congruent with our dominant beliefs. As Joseph Murphy continually tells us in his teachings about the subconscious mind, change is only in accordance with the thoughts entertained in our conscious mind, is characterized by absolute obedience to what it receives. Subconscious mind is also our connection with the universal mind, or the creative force of the universe, or the creative power. Essentially, our conscious mind is the choosing, selecting, initiating phase of our mind, and our subconscious subjective mind is the deep, active, producing phase of our mind, and is linked to the universal creative force and intelligence. That is why sleep meditations are so powerful, because they're right at that point between sleep and waking, when you're accessing the subconscious in a powerful way. It's very easy to see why Deepak Chopra refers to the quantum realm as the transitional realm between spirit and the material world, for the quantum moves into and out of existence between the material world and the world of the absolute, the world of spirit, God, source, first cause. The absolute realm of spirit is the realm of unconditional love, infinite wisdom, absolute power, and perfect peace. It is the realm beyond space and time. It is the changeless. It is eternal. It is the energy of the dominant thought in our subjective mind that creates the influence that then begins the process of manifestation in this world. Thought can be either an individual thought or many thoughts. Whenever we speak of dominant thought, we are talking about the dominant field of thought or dominant pattern of thinking in our consciousness. It is comprised of a great deal of similar thinking amplified by the emotional intensity of the thinking. Our dominant patterns of thinking become a conduit for the flow of the creative power of the universe. Contrary to what many people believe, our subjective mind does not judge the directions it gets from the conscious mind. This is how it works. Number one, we entertain our conscious mind, goes into our subjective mind. Our subjective mind accepts without question and without judgment whatever thoughts we give to it. And then our subjective mind is the one with the creative force of the universe. Through the interaction of our subjective mind and the quantum, this creative force brings into expression in our world the dominant desires and thoughts and beliefs held in our subjective mind and moves us into realities that are consistent with the fields that we are thinking in our conscious mind. It doesn't judge, it's automatic. Indeed, the universe's hidden laws are expressions of the creative process as love, power, intelligence, and the harmony of spirit move into expression in our physical world in response to our thinking. So what happens in our world is not random after all. To the extent that we can open to it and accept it, the love, intelligence, and power that created the awesome universe that we live in is available to us to bring healing into our lives, balance and harmony into our relationships, prosperity into our world, and creative direction in everything we do. Our subjective mind is not the only thing that makes no judgment. The creative force makes no judgment. The creative force is different than the subconscious mind. They are two different things. It simply responds to whatever demand is placed on it by our subconscious mind. In other words, it does not decide that the negative attitudes we are expressing might not reflect what we really want in our lives. Its singular response is to say yes to our dominant thoughts and beliefs to bring them into manifestation. Seems pretty simple, right? It is very simple. So then where is the rub? The rub is that our subconscious mind receives all the thoughts, experiences, and reactions that have ever been in our conscious mind. And much of that is negative. And much of it is much more negative than you realize. If you've ever sat and just followed your stream of consciousness for 20 minutes, you had no idea how negative your thinking is. We may not realize it. The dominant thoughts contained in our subjective subconscious mind is often far more negative than we imagine. It has been for me and many people that I've worked with. So what we experience in our lives is often far more negative than we want. And in many cases, our lives themselves are far more negative and unrewarding than we want because we are continuously thinking in this way. And the beauty that can be found here, however, is when we understand how the creative laws work, we can then begin using them correctly to change the things in our lives that aren't working for us. So wherever you're at right now, that's just a starting point. Now you know the truth. Now you know the truth about the subconscious and the quantum realm. We can transform negative thought patterns into thought patterns that will bring into our world whatever good we are looking for in fields of miracles so that we have a more joyous and fulfilling life. It stands to reason, therefore, that your mind, your consciousness, is your greatest asset. Don't diminish it. Don't neutralize it. Don't numb it. Don't forget about it. It is the key to your miracles. It is the key to your power. Learning how to properly use your mind is the shortcut to your miracle and all the miracles that follow. In a manner of speaking, the proper use of your mind provides the tunnel through the mountain. Remember, a miracle is a series of natural events occurring in the right sequence and at the right time to produce wonderful results. It is probably easier to understand why miracles are a series of natural events. They're governed by the same natural processes that produce all events, and this series of natural events Neville Goddard referred to as a bridge of incidents. A bridge of natural events occurring from one point to another in time. Those are miracles. And as Neville Goddard explains, you always have a way to explain it. Oh, that happened because of this, or that happened because of that. And you can always explain it away. You're always given that convenient option. When we learn how to use the natural laws, they serve us well. When we misuse them or use them with limited understanding, we get either unfavorable or limited results. This is true of natural law as well. Think for a moment of what happens if you turn on the electrical switch of a lamp, as contrasted to what happens if you stick your finger into an electrical outlet. Good and bad results come from different applications of the same law. The creative laws, like all laws, are completely impersonal. Many people spend most of their lives believing they cannot break free of the life they are currently living. They believe they cannot heal physically, they cannot be successful, or they cannot be prosperous. None of this is true, no matter who you are, and no matter how bad your life may be at this moment. The proper use of these laws will bring positive changes into your world. There is a co-creative process that is happening. And although co-creative process is one continuous ever-present action, it can be understood if you break it down into the law of belief, the law of expectancy, and the law of attraction. It's not just about the law of attraction. The first two are interrelated, and the third is the result of universal intelligence and power responding to the first two. We set the creative process in motion through the law of belief and the law of expectancy. Then the law of attraction takes over. The law of belief is what you believe you will receive, what you doubt you will live without. You've heard many versions of this: as above, so below, as within, so without. Each of us has a whole set of beliefs about ourselves and our lives. Altogether, this set of beliefs constitutes our personal law of belief, and the law of belief operates two ways. It is always in the process of formation, being influenced by everything we think, hear, say, and experience. And secondly, it is always producing in our lives those things that are congruent and commensurate with itself. Our belief system is so powerful that it is the foundation for our lives today, whatever that may be. Now, if your life is not all that you would like it to be, this may be a little hard to accept, but remember that you're not alone. All of us have areas of our lives that we want to improve. But yes, it's your fault. All of it is your fault. Take responsibility for it. We're all growing. Besides, it's wonderful to know that if our belief system played a big part in our being where we are, then we are not powerless when it comes to making changes for the better. How do we change a belief? I've dealt with that many times, and there are many more ways to do it, and it's a little different for everybody. We don't have to be the victim of anything. We don't have to go through life letting life happen to us. We can move through life choosing the kind of life we want and actually having it unfold in your world. Don't you want to see it happen? This process sounds very simple. I know, I've heard this before and I've laughed. Well, if it's so simple, why isn't everybody making miracles in their lives? First, not everybody knows and understands the hidden laws of the universe. But second, most of us are unaware that at some or maybe many of our beliefs may be limiting. We don't recognize our negative thinking. Or if we do, we often have no idea of the extent to which we engage in it or how it damages us. Can you imagine what it would look like to be if life responded immediately every time you thought to yourself, I'm so embarrassed, I could almost die, or I give my right arm to have a job like that? But if our subjective, subconscious mind takes literally everything we think and say, and if it immediately goes to work to bring these things into existence in our lives, why don't they all happen, negative thoughts and all? Because our consciousness is comprised of all our mental experiences, and it is our dominant thought about something that manifests in the dominant pattern of our lives. It takes repeated and consistent thought on our part to change a negative dominant thought pattern to one that is positive. As our belief system is based on what we believe to be true, changing it does not come about easily. Think for a moment about the last time you disagreed with someone about some fact, or even about an opinion. Isn't it true we spend much of our time mentally and verbally defending our positions on everything, from big things to little things? From what to do about air pollution to which way we cut our food? Whenever we encounter new information that conflicts with our established beliefs, our first reaction is to attack or dismiss the new information in order to maintain the integrity of the old, just as Einstein did with Willem de Sitter and Alexander Friedman. We all do it. We mentally argue our position and further reinforce our thinking. Having done this, we continue to recreate the same types of experiences with different people and places. This is why the lives of so many of us seem like reruns with a changing cast of characters. It's generally this way every time someone or something challenges our current belief system. We use that experience to consciously reinforce our beliefs. We don't like to be wrong. It is only when we truly change our thinking that we change our consciousness. And when we change our consciousness, our world changes automatically. This is what is meant by the phrase consciousness manifests. The dominant beliefs and thoughts in our consciousness manifest in our world. Of course, our belief system can be positive and healthy in certain areas, and in the same time limiting in others. For example, we may enjoy wonderful health, but at the same time have great difficulty financially, or we may enjoy wonderful professional success in our lives, but encounter serious, consistent relationship problems. How did the differences develop? Our belief systems grow almost like an inverse pyramid based largely on just a few core beliefs about our lives and ourselves. These core beliefs may not be things that we figured out for ourselves. Rather, they usually are things we learned in childhood about ourselves and about what we could expect from the world. We learn from our parents how to respond to the world. Is it friendly? Is it safe? Is it fair? Is it good, bad, or dangerous? Even more importantly, are we okay, or is there something not okay about us? Are we valuable? We also learn from our childhood families how to regard ourselves in relationship to others. Are we better than our relatives and neighbors? Or are they better than we are? Do we have to work hard for everything, or does it come easy? Are we stronger than or weaker than they are? More handsome or more homely? Our beliefs cause us to see the world in a way that is unique to each of us. That is our individual paradigm, the way we see things. One person lives life freely and with a cheerful, open manner that expects and invites trust and reliability, whereas the next person lives from a standpoint of great fear and concern that others are out to get you, that they're evil cabals and everything's a great conspiracy. One person moves forward with great confidence and self-assurance, while another is timid and uncertain. People raised in financial comfort are likely to live with an expectancy of financial abundance in anything they do, while those raised in poverty are likely to expect a life of hardship. The way we see the world is the way the world responds to us. Our programming and our conditioning lead to our beliefs. Our beliefs lead to our attitudes and our thoughts. Our attitudes and thoughts lead to our feelings. Our feelings determine how we think, act, and behave. How we think, act, and behave reinforces our beliefs, which in turn reinforce our attitudes, and it just keeps on going in an endless cycle. What do you believe about yourself? You must change this belief. And then there's the law of expectancy. This is what we truly expect to have happen in any given situation. When we expect something, we look forward to it with a very high degree of certainty or anticipation, and maybe even excitement. We know that in all likelihood it will occur in the time and manner of our mental expectation. Many of our beliefs may be so buried in our subjective mind that we may not even be in touch with them. Expectancy, however, is primary in our conscious mind and thus much easier to alter. We can choose to change it because we are consciously in touch with it and have control over it. We can control the thoughts we choose to entertain in our conscious mind. As we consciously change our expectancy, we change what happens in our world, and at the same time, we gradually change our belief. Whenever a miracle occurs, there has been a change in our belief, a change in consciousness, a change in the way we think about ourselves and the universe we inhabit, a change in our expectancy. We often hear that someone has had a miraculous recovery. What really happened? Was it something supernatural, or was it wonderfully natural? To make the answer clear, those who are healed in the waters of the world-famous healing shrine in Lourdes go there with a deep subjective expectancy of healing, and that's why they are healed. The one thing about expectancy is don't use your past to make your expectancy of the future. We live in a universe of infinite potential, and this potentiality is never limited by our past experience. This means that your miracle is not limited by the fact that it's never happened before. It's never happened to you before. Isn't that a wonderful thing to know, that just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean that it can't happen now? It can happen now. This is a universe of infinite good, capable of constantly producing infinitely new experiences, and each of us is in direct contact with this through the power of our subjective mind in the quantum realm. But in order to experience this good, we have to believe we are worthy of it, and secondly, we have to expect it. And the final is the law of attraction. And once we do our part with the law of belief and expectancy, the law of attraction immediately and automatically comes into operation. This is the last aspect, not the first, of the creative process, which begins to unfold once the first two laws are invoked. Whatever we believe, whatever we expect, begins to be attracted into our life. This is what determines the makeup of our present lives. The law of attraction works like a magnet. It brings into our lives the right people, the right situations, and the right information to make our lives either good or bad. Those things that seem so serendipitous are the normal operation of the law of attraction. This is why the miraculous things that happen in our lives seem so natural. As they're unfolding, they are natural. If we understand that everything is working through energy, if we want miracles as we've described them in this episode, we need to make certain the energy of our thought is always congruent with what we want and not with what we don't want. If we want to change our lives, if we want miracles in our lives, we need to change our expectancy. And to do that, we need to change our belief system. And to do that, we need to change our thinking. I've tried to discuss different techniques in changing your thinking. There's many things you can do. Meditation. And my favorite is sleep meditations or affirmations. We have worked on it through Psychiana. We've worked on it through Neville Goddard. We've worked on it through a number of programs on affirmations. And we've done many teachings on thinking and the mind. And there's so much more for us to learn. It's always good to have as a reminder that the quantum and the mind come together as one. And we understand that we're working in fields of quantum patterns that are initiated by our dominant thoughts. So understand and remember that when you wake up in the morning, you want to create a field because you're always creating a field. So you want to purposely create a field that will be of a dominant thought pattern you want to experience, meaning you send out joy and happiness, and you create a pattern of joy and happiness, which you will see reflected in the energy field of those around you. You change the objects, you change the people, you change everything around you. You change the flowers and the animals, you change the air. I've had days when I woke up and I felt like I made the weather bad. I've had days when I have changed the weather and the plants, everything. We are in constant creation mode. And you're creating a universe every second that starts at the quantum level. But the reason why the quantum's important is that the quantum experiences and works through a field that is in the macrocosmic everything. It's water, but it's happening at the quantum level. It's a quantum ocean all around us that we are swimming in. And all we got to understand is how our minds, which are driving the bus, control this quantum field. When we start to do it together, we start to create expectations and beliefs. We start attracting realities and fields to our experience that can be truly amazing for you and your family and friends or anybody that you imagine. So I wanted to bridge the quantum world into this world of thought. And hopefully that helped you to understand why that world is important. In any case, all episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.